30-second delay.
Welcome, everybody. Hi, I'm Anita, your facilitator. Thank you for coming this evening. So for those folks that are in already, what I'd like you to do is, if you can, if you are a community working group participant, I'd like you to rename yourself on your screen. I mean, keep your name, but rename. So to do that is you hover over, put your cursor on your picture, and then in the top right-hand corner, you'll see a blue box with 3 white dots. If you click on that and you go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the second from bottom where it says rename, if you click on that, on your screen, it'll show your name. And if you could put CWG there, that would just identify you as one of our CWG members. It'd be helpful for the guests that we have and for me as well. So if you could do that, that would be great. And if not, I will try to remember your name. I have a list, but that would be super helpful. All right, what I'm going to do is welcome you. This is our second community working group meeting, and it will be the last one for now. We'll talk a little bit more at the end of the meeting about next steps and kind of how you can continue to be engaged. So next slide. So we are going to be closed caption, and it is in English and in Spanish. English closed captions are available within Zoom and YouTube. So users can follow this link to view both English and Spanish captions in a separate browser window. So if you click on that ibr.news/captions, you can do that. Next slide. So to access closed captions, at the bottom of your screen, you see a menu of options. If you can't see the menu, hover your mouse over the bottom middle and you'll see kind of the menu bar there. And if you can see in your far right, it says closed caption will appear and you can click on that. Next slide. So with our Zoom participation, we do have American Sign Language interpretation available. So please join audio by either phone or computer, but not both. And we encourage participants to turn on your video. If you've joined by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand. And after invited to speak, dial *6 to unmute yourself. And please keep your audio on mute when not speaking. If you experience technical difficulties, please use the Zoom chat feature or call this number, 360-329-6744. Next slide. So for tonight, our agenda is we're going to do an icebreaker, just do a quick review of meeting agreements, goals, framework, and roles. And then we'll have our IBR technical staff, Katie Mangle and Derek A., provide a corridor overview, implementing the active transportation framework, preliminary design options. We're going to have an interactive session in breakout rooms and then report back and then review other ways to engage. So with that, I'm going to overview really quick meeting agreements. This is what we went over last time. You can put relationships first, keep focused on our common goal, notice power dynamics in the room, create a space for multiple truths and norms, be kind and brave, and practice, one more, practice examining racially biased systems and processes, and look for learning. So we're going to do a quick introduction and icebreaker. So we'd like your name. We're going to just have the community working group members identify themselves and introduce themselves. This will be really fun. So we're going to also put this in the chat. So what I'd like you to do is take 2 to 3 minutes and find something in your house that is meaningful to you, that represents your relationship to active transportation and or your experience with the Interstate Bridge. And then we're going to have you show your object on the screen and give us a 1-minute description. And then we'll introduce myself as your facilitator and our IB, our technical leads after that. So maybe Kayla, you can drop that in the chat, and then if you could, is put us on full screen so everybody can see themselves. So any questions on that? So go find something in your house that's meaningful for you. We'll give you maybe 2 minutes, just whatever's handy. I'm sure you have something really fun around your desk. And then come back and we'll go around the group. All right, everybody, kind of looks like you up. I looks like Thomas is still looking. Oh, there you are. You're back. So I'll do a little model here real quickly. What I have on my desk, if you can see, it looks like a crystal ball, and it is. And what I can say is this crystal ball is the meaning when I cross the I-5 bridge. I never know what's going to happen to me. So sometimes I have to look in my crystal ball, and sometimes it'll tell me and sometimes it doesn't. So that's just for fun. So what I'll do is I'll call on you. I think that might be easier as you appear on my screen, if that's okay. So I see, let's see, Robin Richardson.
Good afternoon. So I'm Robin Richardson. I am not only a member of the community working group, but I am also a member of the CAG. I'm an at-large member of the CAG and the community advisory group. And so I don't know if you can see it, but my connection here, it's here on my desk, it's a bicycle. And my bicycle is downstairs in our bike room, but this is what I have because this is what I ride, how I commute to work across the bridge every day. And it represents my commuter bike. I have other bikes, but I have 2 commuter bikes because you never, as you said, Anita, I never know what to expect when I ride across the bridge. And I may have something happen to it. And in case it does, I have a backup bike that I'll go home and pick that up and take that up and ride across the bridge. So thanks for allowing me to be here.
That's great, Robin. Thank you so much. I see Mark Raggett. Good to see you.
Hi, Anita. Hi, everyone. I'm Mark Raggett. I'm on the CWG, and I don't know if you can see my item is a scale, and I don't go over the I-5 bridge too much, but this, I use this a lot when working at the city on the past, as Casey will remember, on the past Columbia River Crossing project. I use this quite a bit, measuring things, arguing about things, trying to figure out the right dimensions and spacing for all kinds of different things for that particular project. So that's when I think about this project, that's what I think about. So it's here, and I wish I was actually going over the bridge riding like Robin just suggested, but looking forward to it. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. Marlon, good evening. Oh, you're on mute, Marlon. Still on mute. Uh-oh. Can you unmute yourself?
There we go.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Sorry about that. I haven't learned how to handle my computer yet. Well, I'm a retired civil engineer. I've been a city engineer. I was a city engineer in Salem, Oregon for a while. I worked for the Portland Development Commission for a while too. Most recently, I was the city engineer in Walla Walla, Washington, and that's where I retired from. So now I'm retired, but I've been serving on the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory County Pedestrian and Bicycle Committee, and I've been teaching the AARP Safe Drivers Training course for about the last 15 years. So I have a keen interest in helping people get around and manage this ever complex traffic system that we are dealing with now. And so I'm I'm keenly interested in this bridge. And I'm hoping that I can offer some words of advice from my experience as an engineer.
Thank you, Marlon. Maybe you had a scale to show as well, sounds like, as an
I
engineer,
could
right?
have.
All right. Thomas.
Hi, Tom here, and I've got a pizza cutter that my son gave to me. This was a gift in recognition of one of 2 trips I've made bicycling across the US. My first trip across the US took me over the I-5 bridge, starting in Seaside, Oregon, and took me to Portland, Maine. So I'm keenly interested in having a good transportation, a good link across the Columbia River, and good routes all across our country. So I serve as a community contributor in this, and I'm also serve with Marlon on the Clark County Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee.
Thomas, pizza cutter, good. Michael Newton.
Hi, I'm Michael Newton. I'm the president of the board of Second Step Housing, a nonprofit in Clark County that provides subsidized housing to a lot of people, many of whom do not have cars and need to access non-motorized transportation. My 2 visual aids are this book, let's see, which I'm sure most of us recognize, which is something I wish I were able to use a lot more, except that right now I'm making a lot of use of this, which is the knee brace that I'll be using a lot of until I get my knee replacement. I also just joined and was just accepted in the Clark Community's Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. I recognize Marlon from the meetings that we had in the last couple of months, and I'm looking forward to. I've enjoyed these meetings. I don't know if this is our last meeting of this group or if we have one more after this, but I've really benefited from these, and I'm very hopeful that this time we're going to get her done. Thanks.
Thanks, Michael. It is the last one for now. We may reconvene, but I'll talk a little bit more at the end of the meeting. Guthrie.
Hi, I'm Guthrie Straw with Oregon Environmental Council, and the item I chose to bring for today is a book titled Best Bike Rides, Portland, Oregon, written by some local authors. This is a highlight for me because I'd like for this project to be great on both a recreational but also a transportation front, whether folks are using it every day to get to and from work, or whether people are considering what to put on the cover of a book about the best bike rides in the region. I'd like this project to represent those interests and a strong interest in cycling and alternative transit for all.
Great. Thank you so much, Guthrie. Barbara, hello. How are you?
Sorry. Yeah, well, the only thing I could think of is a lift ticket, which is to get on the lift bus. And so that's what I use to get around. And I'm looking forward to having the bridge redone so I can kind of check out Vancouver, Washington.
That's great. Thank you, Barbara. See, Marion. Hello, how are you?
Okay, I apologize for keeping myself hidden because I was eating my supper. I've had a busy day. Got back. So the only thing I have is behind me is my bicycle. I don't know if you can see that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I use to cross the bridge, unless I take the bus. But yeah, I'm looking forward to having better bicycle facilities, which isn't saying much, of course, compared to what we have now.
All right. Thank you, Marion. Did I miss anybody on the CWG? Small group tonight, but you all are the best. So I will hand it over to Katie Mangle, one of our IBR technical leads, for a preliminary design corridor overview.
Hi, everyone. It's so nice for you to be back with us. Thanks for spending some time. I love hearing about your personal items, your personal story, why you care about this project. And, you know, part of why we wanted to start with that type of a icebreaker is because we know that you are actually all pretty detail oriented folks. So one of the things that we're going to encourage you to do is kind of keep going with that line of thinking of, you know, think about big picture, what's motivating you, what is that, you know, kind of tapping into those familiar objects in terms of, you know, not trying to overthink everything, because we are going to throw a whole lot of information at you. You won't be able to absorb all of it. If you had a chance to look through the slide deck that we sent last week, you know, there's a lot in there. So I just say that in the sense that out of respect of how much you are going to want to understand all of this, we're going to try to walk you through some information, break it down for you, and focus the discussion really on some of just reactions that are going to be, frankly, kind of getting to more your heart than your head. And if you want to follow up with more, you know, detailed comments via email, we'd love that. But just want to, you know, we really, some of it is going to be about your just reactions today. And so let's dive in. Next slide. So I'm going to spend a little time just kind of grounding in, you know, what we're doing. And so where the project is at, there we go. So right, you know, now through the end of 2021, which feels like it's right around the corner, the program is evaluating some preliminary design concepts. There's a lot of the, you know, at a concept level, a lot of the options for the program, for the bridge replacement, have a lot in common. And so a lot of what we're trying to do is tease out some of the differentiators between some of the options, and doing that with the community, with the project partners, so that in early 22, the community can come together and make essentially a decision on what the multimodal design solution is. What is the project? So that's where we're headed. Next slide, please. And so, you know, as we're gonna talk through what I mean by design options today. We're going to show you some of those, and with some information about the active transportation component of it, particularly the shared use path, because it is different in these different options in some places. But you know, like I said, this is a group that really has a lot of expertise and focus and care about the details of this, of what the path could be, what the streets could be. So, you know, this lists some of the things that we talked about last time and we heard are right on the money. They're really going to be important for this project. Some of these, though, at a diagrammatic level of, you know, some of the decisions that happen right now, you're not going to see them in the, you know, some of the options that we will share in a little bit. Derek's going to walk you through. So next slide. So what I wanted to do is describe, you know, some before we get into some of the design options, which are, when I say design options, they're little like choices about which interchange type, for example, to use. What is the formation of the bridge as it goes over the Columbia, whether it's, you know, side by side or stacked, things like that. The interchanges in Vancouver Island and Marine Drive. What is the, you know, the transit alignment? So those are some things we'll talk more about. But what I want to talk about first is go into a little bit more detail on this bottom bullet. You know, we've said in the last meeting that bike and ped improvements are integrated into all these design options for all of these areas. And so, you know, I really wanted to take some time to dive into that and say, you know, what do we mean by that? Because they're a little more detailed than most of the material that, you know, is real where the decisions are being made. But I wanted to really explain that because there's a lot of great and important elements. So next slide. So when we say all the options include bike and ped elements, I'm going to go through a few slides that outline in just bullet points what that means. And then I'm going to show you a map about where these will apply. So hopefully together you can kind of understand, the magnitude, frankly, of the active transportation improvements all throughout the program area. So of course, everything will be meet ADA. All the ramps and accessways will be ADA compliant. The shared use, there will be a dedicated shared use path, meaning separate from autos on the bridges. On the bridge, we talked about this a lot last time, there'll be a separation of users moving at different speeds. But on the roadways, all of the roads that are either rebuilt or constructed by the program will include sidewalks. And so those sidewalks will meet local standards in City of Portland, City of Vancouver. And City of Portland already has pretty specific and robust sidewalk standards. In Vancouver, they're still kind of in development. And so we're anticipating what the city's standards will be, not necessarily what they are now, because we know that the city's working hard to raise the bar. So same thing for bicycle facilities, where a street is built or rebuilt as part of the program. It will include low stress bike facilities, including providing separation from vehicles. And so we looked at some of those pictures last time, the difference between just a striped bike lane on the asphalt versus a separated from traffic. So again, City of Portland already has really good, strong, robust standards for that. In Vancouver, we're partnering with them as they develop theirs, so that they're going to be pretty robust as well. And we're anticipating that. Next slide. So where there are local street connections, those will be compatible with the local agency plans, for example, the Hayden Island Master Plan. We don't know exactly yet, the active transportation folks don't know exactly yet where the transit stations will be. It depends on the type of transit that's included, but we know that we will provide great access to those transit stations, and including bike parking and everything. All of the options are going to include a reconstruction of the 40-mile loop trail. This is on the Portland side under I-5, closing a huge gap, a key gap in the network, and local street connections down into Northeast Portland. Many of the overcrossings across I-5 going north into Vancouver are going to be affected. And so that's a great opportunity to improve the sidewalks and the bikeways on all of those overcrossings. Amazing, opportunities for connections across I-5 and improving that for the communities. And wayfinding signage is assumed as well. Next slide. And so those are the things we're pretty sure about. These are the things that are like, okay, and when you say they'll meet ADA, last time we talked a lot about, well, maybe we can be doing better than ADA, right? So these are all things that we want to continue to study, and we don't know exactly what's going to happen. So it's kind of a watch this space, continue to advocate, continue to pay attention. All the designers are really, focused on making this the best project, but all of this is the list. I'm not going to read through it, but all of the kinds of things that are still in the intent statement. So a lot of work still be done. And this would be true regardless of the design options that we talk about later. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is the map. You may remember at the last meeting in the breakout rooms, we spent a little bit of time looking at what we were calling the active transportation flows maps, which were showing generally, where people are biking through the project area, where people were walking through the program area. And so this is a different version of it, which emphasizes a little bit more where we're pretty sure at this point, the program will reconstruct or build new roadways and pathways. And so when you think about it just through the active transportation lens, and with the lists that I just outlined there, these are all of the places that will be improved to include better sidewalks, better bike lanes, and shared use pathways. So it's pretty extensive, and so in that way, pretty exciting. It's a huge area, and lot of opportunities for that detailed thinking to come in when the time is right. Okay, next slide. And so with that, we're going to talk a little bit more. At the last meeting, we talked about the active transportation framework, and I want to revisit that just as a quick reminder so that we can start to talk about how we're applying that. And I'm going to just introduce it, just reminisce a little bit from what we talked about last time. And then we're going to dive into like, well, that map I just showed, that's fine at a, really big picture. It shows the whole program area. We're going to actually break that down, North Vancouver, downtown Vancouver, and then Portland area, and have a chance to talk a little bit more about what all of this means. So let's dive in, and I want to, when we get to that, I'll welcome some comments from you all who are very familiar with those areas. Next slide. Here we go. So just remember this. So this is important. Anytime that we talk about active transportation, we all recognized, and I heard some stories last time about how really horrible those conditions are out there today. Many of you know it intimately. So we aren't looking for a little bit better. We're looking for a lot better. And it's really important that we make it great, that we make it great and accessible for all. And that's going to be critical for the communities and all the agencies to meet their goals for climate and for transportation, for community building, and for equity. Next slide. So throughout the team, we really, what does that mean? It's really a people first design when it comes down to designing the facilities. I think, really thinking about how people are going to be moving through this space. Next slide. Now, all the spaces that we create, they'll be moving underneath it, moving across it, up those ramps, all the things we talked about. And I wanted to share, this was something that was new, we came up with, or that we found this map after the community working group meeting, which incorporates also this question of, so with equity, what does it mean to apply the equity lens to active transportation? We know it's not we'd like to think that just providing better active transportation facilities means we serving everybody in better and with more equitable outcomes, but that's not really good enough. We need to think more strategically about who we're serving. And so part of what we're looking at is improving access options for people who don't have vehicle access, which is what the map on the right shows. So the darker areas are higher proportions of people in those areas that don't have access to a vehicle. A lot of that is in the northern Vancouver area, but also non-motorized commuters. As I mentioned earlier, we're striving for universal accessibility, which means maybe going above and beyond ADA requirements and thinking about, how to truly serve all users with different mobility, availability. And this connecting the communities, connecting east-west across the highway is going to be a really important part of this equity, these equity outcomes. Next slide. Okay, so that's enough of me talking. I just wanted to kind of frame it all up again. And Derek is now going to dive into these maps. And if you could maybe just let him kind of explain the map to you, and then we welcome either some questions, clarifying questions, comments in the chat. These areas, again, really well, better than we do, even though we feel like we're studying them all the time at this moment. We do wanted, so I'll let Derek go ahead here, and why don't you show him what we have, Derek?
All right, thanks, Katie. So good to see everyone. Again, I'm Derek Abe, Active Transportation Co-Lead with Katie. And so the next series of slides are going to show you some of the existing conditions that we've got on the ground today. And then in addition to those, we've highlighted areas where, again, we know there are likely to be some great improvements to the walking, biking, rolling networks. So we'll start on the north end in the neighborhoods. and take a look at some of the facilities we've got on the ground there. As you can see, Columbia Street is shown as a proposed or planned bike facility here, but that's moving along. We're going to have some protected bike lanes on Columbia. That's going to be a really key north-south connection. Beyond that, if we could go back to slide, it's like we've switched screens.
Yeah, sorry, not sure what happened with my screen here. Give me just a sec. Here we go.
You can see some other existing facilities, bike lanes and shared roadways on the west side of I-5 there. Really, really important is in thinking about those east-west connections, going back to the map that Katie just described, the equity implications of all of the neighborhoods and parts of the community that don't have a lot of folks don't have access to vehicles. Creating those east-west connections is going to be really important, and there are several ways that we can do that today. But thinking about how we can make them even better. And so the overcrossings that we have at 33rd and 29th Street are going to be really important neighborhood connections. And then further south, 4th Plain, the interchange there. And again, as Katie said, these are going to be improvements that are going to serve more than just the immediate bridge influence area. These are going to be improvements that really create those crosstown connections, and in addition to helping folks access the transit, to access many of the destinations within the study area. So I'll stop there. Are there any questions about anything I've said so far?
Since we're small group, yeah, go ahead and unmute yourself and just speak up.
Okay, I just have one question. I don't see Mill Plain on here or SR 14. I realize there's going to be challenges getting the landing down low enough without blocking shipping traffic to serve those. But I wonder if you can mention that at all.
We're going there next, Michael. You've got your crystal ball.
I didn't mean to steal your thunder.
No worries. Yeah, we'll get to that. And the point that you made about kind of the vertical clearance is going to be really important, and is actually something that we're exploring, paying a lot of attention to right now. So yeah, before we shift down to the Mill Plain and downtown area, any other questions, comments, thoughts on the Vancouver neighborhood section? All right, well, in that case, why don't we go to the next slide? And so there you go. You can see we've shifted down a little bit. We've got the McLaughlin crossing, Mill Plain, Evergreen. What will become a new crossing, we're calling the Community Connector at the moment. That is a bike and pedestrian only kind of bridge or crossing over I-5 there. And then we've got a few others in the immediate kind of bridgehead area. One of the key things to note about this area is that, we're looking at some pretty substantial improvements as a part of this project. It is likely that Main Street will be extended so that it reaches down to the waterfront, and there will be a realignment of Columbia Way where it kind of curves around under I-5 and connects into Columbia Street. So improvements to those streets as they're extended and reconstructed, and then likewise improvements to the McLaughlin, Mill Plain, and Evergreen crossings that we have today. The point that you made, Michael, about the vertical clearances is very relevant to both the bridge itself, the alignment of the interstate highway, and then the connections to the active transportation networks. So you can see here we've got a much more robust network which makes sense, right? We've got a lot of key east-west connections, and then some important north-south connections on the west side, Vancouver downtown. Anything anyone wants to say about any of these lines on the map? Any thoughts? Any questions beyond that? All right. One other thing I'll point out about some of these east-west crossings that is really important is we're actually striving for there to be on each of these directional facilities. That means sidewalks on both sides of the street, and it means bike facilities, directional bike facilities on both sides of the street, on the south side and the north side, serving both east and west traffic. And what that does is it ensures that there's continuity in the existing bike and pedestrian networks, right? Where we're transitioning into downtown or over onto the east side and the neighborhoods further east. We want there to be continuity. We want it to be consistent. We want it to be intuitive. So that's gonna be our aim for these facility types.
Derek, could you touch on the ramp at the where we have the shared use path ramp connection? Just describe that a
Yeah.
little.
And I see Mark has his hand up too, so.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Mark, did you want to go first, and then I can expand on the shared use path?
I can. Thanks for going over this, Derek, I guess. In terms of, I like and I appreciate the different colors and the different types of facilities here. Could you trace, and I'm seeing some purple, I guess what's happening, the shared use path stuff is usually the stuff that's most attractive to the most people. And so is that making connections up to your community connector, which is a big investment? Like, is there ways you can get, like, what is if I'm coming over the bridge and I want to sort of circulate through Fort Vancouver, the airfield, whatever, and get to that community connector and get back to the bridge, is there a way to do that so that I don't have to ride on a blue bike lane on maybe a busy street and where I'm uncomfortable or something like that? So
Yeah,
that these investments can be linked together as opposed to just kind of dropped in here and there because there's an opportunity. I guess that's my question.
Thanks. Derek, if you don't mind, I'll jump in on this because I think great comment, Mark. Think about this as just a puzzle piece. The program, the partners, all the agencies need to do exactly what you're describing to create a cohesive network. So what these maps, the only things these maps show essentially are existing conditions as a base, and then the one puzzle piece of what we are pretty darn confident that the IBR program will construct, these segments. And that that isn't where the story ends. But you're right, then it'll be also, what do the cities do? How do we, what other grants could fund other pathways or whatever? Like, there's definitely still like a what's next or what else. At this point, we don't have that information yet, but you're right. That is where this is heading. Right now, this is just one puzzle piece. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and just to build off of that, Katie, what this map also helps us do is identify what are those connections that we need to make. What are the dots, the points between A and B that we do need to connect, and how does that relate to the existing network? So in some ways, we're kind of identifying what those missing links are. And short answer, Mark, is that is a key connection that we're studying, we're exploring. The community connector is an amazing opportunity to bridge both sides of I-5. But how do we connect that to the main kind of desire lines and main bike and pedestrian flows that we identified last time, namely the bridge, right?
Yeah. Well, maybe just providing, like you and Katie said, I guess, providing direction to the city or whoever else is going to pick up the remaining puzzle pieces and try and connect them. So where the dash is, like to your point, Derek, like between the main street downtown Vancouver and that community connector, where is the dash that needs to happen for that separated facility on that side,
Right.
not to mention the other side.
Yeah, yeah. And beyond the project, beyond the IBR program, there will be other recommendations, coordinate with the city on,
Mhm.
XYZ, and these facilities would tie into the bridge. These facilities are needed, right? There's currently
Mhm.
gaps throughout the citywide network. So those are all things that we're identifying. Yeah.
So Derek, Marion had a comment, and I see Michael has his hand up, but Marion says, how high is the bridge going to be over the walkway along the river, on the riverfront?
It's a good question. And there isn't a clear definitive answer quite yet, because the bridge options are still being explored. So what we do know is that it has to be high enough that the bridge, I-5, the transit alignment, the shared use path, everything that's coming off that bridge can clear over the railroad, BNSF railroad line, right? And you can see that on the map here. And then it's going to start dropping down to meet the existing, kind of tying into the existing I-5 further downstream. So it's got to clear over that, but it also has to be under the airfields, Pearson Airfield's flight path. So it's kind of there's a window, if you want to call it that, where we're aiming to bring the highway, the transit, and bikes and pedestrians all through there. There's a lot of stuff already on the ground there that we're going to try to integrate with. So
There's a current alignment goes under the railway. Why can't we keep it under the railway?
the current alignment goes, which alignment are you talking about, Marion?
The current bridge goes underneath that rail line that runs along the north side of the river. It doesn't go over it.
So you're asking, why wouldn't this bridge option
Right.
go under it?
Right.
It's a good question, and I don't know that I have a clear answer to that, except that we know that there's a couple things we have to consider. There's a bunch of new developments slated for this area as well, right? So we're looking at what's on the ground today, what it's feasible to fit in that envelope of space. And then we have to think about what is potentially going to be there in the next 5, 10, 20 years and beyond, right? And so it becomes a very constrained place where we're trying to land this bridge. And I'm sure the bridge team has looked at the possibility of it going under the railroad, but you know, these are emerging as the most feasible options at this point, given all the constraints that we're aware of.
Well, it's going to be pretty high, towering over the waterfront.
It will be, and you know, how that shared use path connects down to the ground is one of the key questions we're trying to answer.
It's going to have to be a longer ramp because of that.
Yep, exactly. And knowing that A, it needs to meet ADA accessibility guidelines, and B, it's got to be better than that. It's got to be something folks are going to be comfortable taking, not just safe, not just accessible, but comfortable, right? Means that the grades have to be you know, approachable enough that, you know, people in mobility devices, people in wheelchairs, people pushing strollers are going to be comfortable getting from the ground to the path. And you're right, it's going to be up there. With the various bridge designs, it could be anywhere from I believe the number is 75 feet up to over 100 feet. So it's high up there, right? And to your point, we have to figure out a ramping situation that is going to enable folks to access it comfortably.
I assume there are going to be elevators too, though. I would hope.
That is, yeah, so that's a good question. It's something that the team is looking into as well.
Mhm. Okay.
Katie, did you have something to say before we move on to Michael's question?
Well, yeah, we'll have time to dive into this issue also a little bit later. So maybe just maybe one more comment. And we have 2 more areas we want to talk about before the
Mhm.
break.
Okay.
Yeah, and Marion's question did get folks to start thinking about how the shared use path would land off of the bridge in this area, and so that was I think a really good tie-in there. There are several design and ramping options that we're exploring is kind of the short answer on this side of the water. So
Okay, Michael, and then we'll move on.
Thanks. This is kind of a tangent to what was already asked. Fortunately, great minds were thinking alike. But in the CRC project, one of the square the circle kind of issues was being over the shipping lanes high enough to accommodate industrial river traffic, while being low enough to accommodate the airport. And the current design, the drawbridge sort of handles that, but we don't want a drawbridge. And I'm wondering whether, presuming we're not going to do another drawbridge, and getting back to the active transport, which is, I'm trying to contain this, but do any of these connections here rely upon how that is resolved? Sorry, that was a convoluted question, and I'll go back on mute now.
Let me try to pull that apart. So that's absolutely correct. And the height of the bridge is dependent on the clearance, the navigation clearance over the water. That is another thing that lends to this bridge design, or the bridge designs being considered, at a much at the heights that we're talking about, right? So as it comes overland, it's higher than the bridge today, right? We know we have to clear the railroad and then dodge the planes overhead, and then we have to land this thing back down to grade, right? And so that grade change is really, really important. How fast we are dropping, climbing, or ascending is really important. There are maximum grades for the highway. There are maximum grades for transit. And then there are maximum grades for walking and biking. So all of those constraints in terms, just the vertical clearances kind of give us the designs that we're considering today, push us in that direction. And it is going to be a fairly high bridge. So.
Yeah, and Kayla, could you advance the slide one? Because the next one slide actually is a good, here we go. Because it's a good slide to continue to speak to in these issues.
Yeah. So, this, I think where we're going is kind of a discussion of like what is the shared use path environment going to be like on the bridge itself, right? If we take a moment to consider, everything we would need to do to get onto the bridge itself, and then we're on the bridge, and what is that environment going to look like? We know that we want it to be as direct as possible. We know we want it to be as effortless as possible. That there's a feeling of comfort, both in terms of, the proximity to vehicles and big semis and all of the other traffic that the highway's carrying, but we also want it to be comfortable between users of the shared use path. We talked a lot about that last time around, right? That there needs to be some separation between folks buzzing by on e-bikes or, on their race bikes, on the weekend versus folks pushing strollers and walking the dog and with the kids trailing behind on their bikes. It's got to be different environments for different users. The most direct path would probably take about 10 minutes to cross the Columbia, the main river. And then, another 4 minutes or so to cross over the North Portland Harbor. So, it's probably going to be, in the vicinity of 20-25 minutes to travel from Portland to Vancouver on this new bridge. That's all just to give you an idea of how long it would probably take. And
Derek, does that time include time up on getting up the ramps, or is that just up on the bridge? I was trying to remember.
It's just on the bridge, yeah.
Yeah.
So the ramps again are still being designed, still being worked out. And to Marion's point, some of them could be quite long, and so that's going to add time. That's going to add distance to these as well. So this is just the bridge, the path, while you're up in the air, kind of a estimate of the time it would take.
Marlon, you had a question?
Well, yeah, Derek, currently the shipping lanes are under the part of the bridge that has the raising deck.
Mhm.
If we could move that shipping lane farther to the south, that would help us bring the bridge down a little bit quicker. So is there any consideration given to moving that shipping lane a little farther to the south?
That's a great question. I do not know the answer to that. Yeah.
Okay, put it on the list. I think it's
I
something that has
will.
to be considered.
Yep. And our bridge design team, our highway design team, they are on top of it, and I'm sure they could probably give you a quicker answer than I can, but that is something we'll pass along. We'll look into that.
Okay,
Thanks, Marlon.
thank you.
I will just mention that one reason that it's not where it is now is because of the rail bridge downstream, that the opening for that is close to the Vancouver shore. But there is a proposal to move that one a little closer to the center also.
Well, there's no question about it that they'd have to move those to different under both bridges in the same, but there's enough room, I think, that the ships could maneuver under the current opening in the railroad bridge and then get to the raised, a different channel under the highway bridge. Anyway, worth considering.
And then you saw Michael's comment saying the dredging involved in migrating the shipping lane south might be a project rivaling the interstate bridge replacement.
Could be, yeah. The depths of the channel, and that's a whole different kind of traffic, right? Whole different kind of transportation movements we would need to account for. All right, well, let's go to the next slide.
Derek, Tom Baltus, if I can jump in real quick.
Sure.
Has any study of this whole project delinked the active transportation aspect and moved it down to cross over where the railroad line is, rather than trying to integrate it with the road? You've got less of a climb over in that area, and there's less traffic. It would be a quieter avenue across. Just
Yeah,
curiosity there.
that's a really good idea. There are, of course, a whole lot of trade-offs to consider with something like that as well. And the directness of the path, the connections to that bridge, and how immediately that particular crossing would respond to the desire lines, the needs, the destinations that folks are traveling to and from. So I haven't explored that, and I don't know to what extent that was explored as a part of CRC. But it is an interesting idea. Yeah.
Another factor is that, as I mentioned earlier, a really important part of this project is increasing transit service. And so that therefore a big important part of the active transportation network is connecting to the transit service to help people get to the high capacity transit stations without having to drive, So I think that's a big part of why it's a very multimodal project with everything kind of braiding around the spine that's currently occupied by I-5.
Mm-hmm. And then there's, you know, the question of the structural integrity of the bridge and the crossing, and ensuring that, you know, the facilities we build are going to serve all of these modes in the event of an earthquake, right? They're gonna provide that lifeline, that connection. So I don't know what that would mean if we were to move something over the railroad bridge, and what that would entail, but it's another way of looking at it. Marlon, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, when I was working for the PDC, it was about the time they discovered that the risk of earthquakes in the Portland, Vancouver area was much higher than they had ever anticipated before, to the extent that the existing bridges in Portland were not designed to withstand those kinds of earthquake happenings. So they spent a lot of time while I was working there refitting those bridges and upgrading their ability to withstand an earthquake. So that's a real big issue for this structure, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Thanks, Marlon. I think we need to move on. So Derek, can I have you go for this last slide?
Yep.
And then we'll take a break. Thanks.
All right, so we're moving further south now. We're coming over Hayden Island, and so you can see some of the lines that we've drawn there in green are some new local roads that we'll be rebuilding. And then you've also probably noticed that Tomahawk Island Drive, which is the center street under I-5 on Hayden Island, will continue creating a really a much needed east-west connection across I-5 there. There will be a new arterial bridge, and that is going to provide connections for vehicles and potentially for bikes and pads and transit over the North Portland Harbor. Marine Drive, a significant portion of Marine Drive and what is today on the east side MLK, will be rebuilt as a part of the interchange reconfiguration. And there will likely be a new local street that connects Expo Center to the Bridgeton neighborhood under I-5 there for local access. So you can see where that shared use path, the routing for that shared use path is proposed to link up to the bridge there. Katie?
Thanks. And I guess I just want to add, so this area in particular, this is where a lot of the design options are. So we'll be talking about three different ways to achieve these outcomes in a few minutes after the break. So these are deliberately like big, broad, smudgy lines.
Yeah.
You know, there are different ways to make these connections. And so that's what we'll get into, but they all more or less do this, like make these types of east-west connections, these types of north-south connections.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. One thing I do want to point out is I want to draw your attention to the purple lines there. So those are existing shared use paths today. And for anyone that's ridden through the area, ridden over the bridge, you know what I'm talking about when I say that it is not the most intuitive, most direct route. It is pretty circuitous. You have to know where you're going, despite the wayfinding that we have out there. You're going up and down and around and up and down some more, and crossing intersections and riding on sidewalks. And you know, it's bad. It's not good by any stretch of the imagination. So what we want to do is improve it so that it more closely resembles that yellow swath connecting Delta Park all the way up to the bridge. Make it something more direct, make it something more intuitive, more comfortable, you know, and providing access as well as local connections between the various neighborhoods in this area.
Thanks, Derek. So we're going to take a break, but after the break, we're going to get into more detail of a lot of these. So save your questions until then. So right now it's 5:32. We're going to take about a 15-minute break, which means coming back at about we'll say 5:45. Okay, and I'll give you a 2-minute kind of comeback call, or maybe a minute and a half. But feel free to just put yourself on mute. You can take your video off, turn it off, and take a little break, and then I'll call you back in about 13 minutes. Okay, thanks everyone. Okay, everybody, I'm giving you the 2-minute warning. Grab your snack. Do whatever you need, and let's move on back in a couple minutes. All right, everybody, break is over. Hope you had a nice stretch. And we're going to hand it back to Derek Abe and Katie Mangle to talk about more in depth on the preliminary design options.
Thank you, Anita. Let's see, Kayla, could you get the slides up? There you are. Okay. Next slide. So I've been saying this term design options, throughout the meeting. And so we wanted to now walk you through the design options. And so again, over the next 2 months or so, the goal for the program is to make some decisions on these design options. And so you'll notice that, today we talked about everything from the North Vancouver neighborhoods sort of all the way down to Delta Park. There aren't design options in every part of the corridor. And so especially, that northern part, there are still plenty of things to talk about, for the next couple of years as everything is under design, but there's not a design option at this point where the community needs to make a decision. The key decisions are really on the bridge, on downtown Vancouver, that connection, and Hayden Island and Marine Drive interchange types. And so some of these are sort of, again, almost like using that metaphor of puzzle pieces. These are some of the really big puzzle pieces that need to be put into place so that we can continue to do a lot of problem solving around transit and the shared use path and all of the human scale elements of the program. So next slide. Okay, so we're going to start, kind of walk you through these, and then maybe if you have questions, put them in the chat. Want to make sure that we have a chance to kind of really walk you through all of these, and we have a lot of time to go back and discuss them. So Derek, why don't you dive in here and with the options around the bridge crossing over the Columbia, which the little cute little graphic here is just making sure it's pointing to the one over the Columbia. There's also a bridge over the North Portland Harbor. So the option is really around where that orange arrow is. Derek, take it away.
Right. So, I think we touched on this a little bit earlier in the meeting, but, the shared use path environment on the bridge itself, on the structure, is going to depend on, obviously the type of bridge it is and how the various pieces of that are configured. So there will be lanes for vehicles, there will be transit, and of course there will be a shared use path. And we'll walk through what those various configurations look like for each of the design options. And we can have some discussion around that, kind of the pros and cons and, the various considerations with each of those. So you can go to the next slide, Kayla. Okay, so we've there are a lot of design options under consideration. There are a lot of variations and permutations of each of those options, but for our discussion purposes and for, with the purpose of conveying to you how these are different and how we might compare them or contrast them, we've broken them up into 3 options. Okay, so for the bridge itself, there are a couple of different ways that the shared use path fits into the design. So with option 1, we have 2 bridges, and I'll go into these a little bit further. The next few slides zoom into each of these, and we'll talk about them specifically. But option 2, again, 2 bridges, and then option 3, what we're calling a stacked alignment, is a single bridge that's carrying everything over the Columbia. Okay, and with each of these, we've got dedicated, the same number of travel lanes, dedicated transit guideway, and then a dedicated shared use path area. So we're studying all of these various options. Again, there are a lot of pieces and a lot of variables at play that mean different things depending on the option. And all of that's going to, of course, be informed by the feedback that we received to you tonight from you all. So why don't we go to the next slide, and we'll talk about option 1, which we're calling the 2013 LPA. So this was the design that advanced out of the CRC process back in 2013, and so we're sort of using this as a starting point in some ways for this particular design option. Option 1 is the 2-bridge configuration. So you have one of the bridges is for northbound vehicular traffic, and then the other bridge on the downstream side, on the west side, is for southbound vehicular traffic. It's on that southbound side where high capacity transit is going to be running on the lower level. And then it's on the upstream, on the east side, where we have the shared use path, the multi-use path running on the lower level as well. So it's kind of tucked in under there. So you can see from the plan view top-down map above the cross sections there that there are a number of connections that we need to think about. Right, on Hayden Island, we need to think about how this path is going to connect back down to the local street network. And then likewise in Vancouver, when we make landfall there, we need to think about how we're going to get that shared use path down to the street. And here we're showing a ramping scheme. You could call it a double helix, a double loop that loops back down and around Columbia Way, tying into Columbia Street there. So again, this is a concept that was loosely identified as the preferred alternative in the CRC, back in the CRC heyday. So any questions about option number 1 so far? And we'll take a quick question or two here, and then, as Katie said, we're going to reserve most of our time after we've kind of walked through these options to discuss the options, and we'll have the graphics back on screen so we can discuss those. Mark, you had your hand up.
Comment by Marion about
okay.
First, not seeing the difference between 1 and 2, and then Mark, and then Michael. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we'll get to the differences here in a second with different options. And you're right, there are some many similarities between the two. So.
Okay, Mark.
Thanks, Derek, for this. And I guess my question is to you and Katie for your impressions of this design, as far as starting for trying to make everything better.
Mm-hmm.
What do you guys? What's your take on where we left it in 2013, as far as active transportation and this particular solution? I guess as we go through the options, it'd be interesting to hear, based on everything we already agreed to in terms of the framework, what are your 2 cents on what's working and what's not?
Yep.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's a helpful way to kind of frame the presentation as well, Mark. So I'll kind of offer some, I think, some pros and cons, some considerations as we go. Why don't we take, sorry, Anita, who had their hand up next?
Michael Newton.
Yes, I have to confess that I was a fan of the active transportation part of the CRC project, and I like this option. If there is, in addition to the Helix, if there is an elevator, and Helix is great for people that are physically fit, they can ride their bike up there, but probably sucks for people in a wheelchair, which is not to say wheelchair people are not physically fit, but people for whom, you know, a lot of physical effort in a very short time to get up. Anyway, that was my only comment, just to see
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. Agreed 100%. There, you know, if you're in a wheelchair, no matter how physically fit you are, it's going to be labor intensive to climb that ramp, right? Not to mention, it is going to take time to do that too, right? And a part of, I think, optimizing the path is minimizing out of direction travel, is minimizing the time it takes to get from A to B. And obviously we want to do that in a way that is going to also minimize the amount of effort it takes, physical effort it takes to navigate this.
An elevator was mentioned earlier. I'm sorry, I don't know if I mentioned that before, but earlier somebody said that and it seemed to be received well.
It is something that is under consideration. There are lots of things to weigh when it comes to elevators, but that is totally a feasible solution to a lot of the issues that we're talking about here.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up again, Michael.
I'd also like to offer just real quick, since we're talking about accessibility, our accessibility advisor, Barbara. Do you want to comment now or do you want maybe later? It's certainly great to hear from you though.
Oh, you're muted, Barbara.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, thank you. I think I'll wait till later.
Okay.
Okay, we'll make sure we give you some time.
Absolutely. Okay, Marlon, I see you waving your hand there.
Yeah,
really quickly. Yeah.
Just a quick question. Is the curve of this bridge because the existing bridge has to stay in existence until this is done?
That's a really good question. That is my understanding.
Okay. Otherwise, I would see no reason why it couldn't come straight across and shorten up the bridge a little bit. But
that's absolutely a benefit of this downstream tangent bridge design, Marlon, is that it maintains
Flip
constructibility.
to Kayla, could you go to option 2 to the next slide? Because that is the main difference right there. You saw that?
I got you.
And so the straight alignment is essentially an engineering improvement over the LPA. Otherwise, as you pointed out, not a lot of differences between the two, but that's an important one.
And now that we've talked about option 1 a little bit and we're showing option 2, I want to go back to Marion's comment about, you know, how do these two differ from an active transportation perspective? How do these two differ in terms of the shared use path? So they're very similar to your observation, Marion, especially on the Vancouver side. And indeed, that is you'll see that curly Q, that double helix ramp, and routing you under I-5 up to Columbia Way that's a common theme among many of the design options. The difference here is that when we get to Hayden Island, the landing is a little bit different. And so here, what we're doing is we're bringing the shared use path over to the east side of I-5. Previously, we had it on the west side of I-5. And that might seem like a subtle difference, but it means a lot in terms of fulfilling the major kind of desire lines, fulfilling the major pedestrian and bike flows that that we know are that are present in this location from, you know, North Portland, Marine Drive to Hayden Island, and then over to Vancouver. So this is going to, this part of the design, bringing the shared use path over to the west side, is something that several of the design options have in common. And then similarly, as shown in option 1, that shared use path staying on the east side is something that many of the design options also have in common. There are a couple of options that we're studying that have them on both sides of the path as well. Or I'm sorry, both sides of I-5, east and west. So something to pay attention to as we get further into the designs, and we're going to zoom in even further here in a minute. So you'll see what that actually looks like as we go further south to Portland.
And there's a note in the chat from Casey Wiles, one of our IBR technical team, says, yes, the existing bridge must remain in place until the new replacement bridge is functional for traffic, including active transportation.
All right, I got it right.
That's for all.
Thanks, Casey.
Yeah.
Mark's got his hand up again. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to stall this again. Derek, can you confirm, so this green path is on the east side of the bridge, is that correct? So their views from Mount Hood would be unobstructed potentially from this side of the bridge. Is that correct? To be looking
That's
at the Columbia Gorge and Mount Hood.
That's correct. Yeah.
Which
Sorry,
if we're
we
on
should have
this thing for
included-
so long. Well, yeah, I'm just
Yeah.
thinking about user experience again,
Mhm,
as opposed to the previous scheme that had it on the other side.
mhm.
Being able to look at Mount Hood might be attractive to active
Yeah,
transportation users.
and I would argue more attractive than the downstream kind of, you know, West Hills, Salvi Island view, right? And as we think about the bridge as a destination, a viewpoint, a view like that is an obvious benefit to it being on the upstream east side. Yeah. Sorry, the north arrow must have been cropped out of the map image there, but yeah, so north is to the right there.
Derek, can you say a few words about the space within the bridge where the path would be? Because that'll be a difference between these two and the third one. So I just want to have you touch on that before we move to the third option 3.
Yeah, that's right. So in this 2-bridge design, in the straight alignment, and in option number 1 in the curved alignment, both of those shared use paths, both of those multi-use paths are on the lower level of the northbound bridge. So on the easternmost span, and you can see both in the cross section on the bottom, the colorful one, and then the kind of the view triangle there on the image to the right, that they're going to be kind of tucked in under the deck, the upper deck there. So, you know, with that particular design, there will be a lot of design considerations for us to make it a place that is not only hospitable and safe, but one that is comfortable, that hopefully maximizes view, right? But also one that reduces or minimizes the noise levels with the traffic overhead. You know, because it's covered, because it's tucked under there, it's more kind of sheltered from the elements, right? But that also has some implications for the type of environment and the user experience under that upper deck, right? We don't want it to be dark and kind of ominous. We don't want there to be the sense that you're entering a long tunnel, right? And that there is, you know, the sense of enclosure resembles a confined space. We don't want that, right? We want it to be open. We want it to be a place that people can look out and enjoy the views from. So think about what that might be like when you're on the lower deck under that upper deck where all of that northbound traffic is above you.
There's a comment and question, Derek, from Thomas. It says, doesn't the location of multi-use and high-capacity transit under the bridge dictate a much higher bridge to accommodate river traffic?
So I think what you're getting at there, Thomas, is why stack the bridges, right? Why compromise the amount of space, vertical space that this bridge envelope will have? And I think a part of that answer is, if not the main part of that answer, is we want to try to minimize the footprint of this structure, whether it's 2 bridges or 1 bridge, as much as possible. That has a lot of, the motivations for that are numerous. I think, we want to minimize that footprint because, it's a more compact design is going to allow us to accommodate everything that's on the ground today, right? We don't want to be pushing through existing buildings as much as possible. We don't want to be moving highways. We don't want to be moving, things that are already there. So we want to minimize that footprint. We also want to maximize open space. We want to maximize developable land area. We want to make sure that what is there, what is built outside of the bridge or under the bridge, is allowed to do so in a way that increases our opportunities for the environment, for the urban design, for the open space and landscaping, all of that. The other part of that is minimizing footprint over the water and the impacts that would have to the natural environment, right? All of these structures need to be supported, and the number of bridges, the number of structures we have is going to increase the number of columns we have and the impact on the ground below. So, Casey, I see you're there, and you could probably speak to this much more eloquently than.
And then Michael and Mary have a comment too in the chat. So, Casey, do you want to go first? Where are you? I can't hear you, Casey. I think you're on mute, or it doesn't show that you're on mute, but we can't hear you. Oh, staying headphones.
Is that connected? Did that connect?
There you go.
Okay, sorry about that. We did study the bridge height, the height of the structure itself previously. We had during the CRC, we actually had 3 bridges, and because the size of the 2 roadway bridges are so large, it was determined that the depth of the lower structure could actually accommodate both light rail at that time, or high capacity transit, and the bicycle pedestrian facility without increasing the depth of the structure. So that's kind of that's what I heard as far as the question goes. It doesn't increase the depth of the structure to have that underneath.
Thanks, Casey. So there's a couple questions or comments. Michael said, that was good. Not a happy topic to broach, but is there a concern that the underbridge option might help create an unhoused refuge? Then Marion also said something about the stack, is not to mention the noise level and bird droppings.
Yeah, I think our bridge architect puts it really well. At this level, at this concept level, we can, we create almost like we choose which problems we want to work on later. And so by creating a covered space, there are pros and cons. It will, as Derek said, probably protect users of all types and from the elements. That also might make it more attractive for camping. And so, the next option we're going to show, actually, maybe go ahead to the next slide, Kayla. And so this shows a different approach, which is more cantilevered pathway off the side. So again, has pros and cons, so more exposure to the elements on those rainy February days, you're biking across the bridge, but also perhaps a little bit easier to, kind of control the space and monitor it, maybe less of a tunnel-like feeling. So I think it is fair to just think about all of the different ways the space is going to be used. And that's, we'll have environmental design problems to solve either way. But that is a key difference between these two.
Yeah. And there are of course pros and cons to both. And there are design solutions in both cases as well, right? So, one thing that I hear quite often with designs like this is that, you're exposed to the elements. You're going to get rained on, you're going to get hailed on, and in some years you're going to get snowed on, and you're exposed to those elements. But there are ways to kind of solve for that, right? You can have awnings, you can have some covered areas, and in some cases, it may not even matter, right? If you are riding across this bridge, you are likely riding from a transit center, or you're riding from home, or and you're riding from the office, and you're coming from somewhere, and you're riding in the elements to get to the bridge, right? You're already exposed to the elements. Here, I think one of the main differences with exposure to elements is that you're high up, you're high up in the sky, and that wind that's coming off the Columbia is strong, right? It's going to be raining sidewards at times, and the gusts are going to be blowing hard, and so that exposure to the elements is a little bit different when you think about it in this bridge environment. On the flip side, your views are going to be unencumbered. Your views of Mount Hood are going to be pretty spectacular on a good day. And you'll have the wind in your hair, and it'll be pretty amazing to ride over this bridge. So there are some trade-offs, and there are some different things to consider, and design solutions that can help us to make it as good as possible with each of these options.
Let's see, Mark.
So another, I guess, question on this one, and I appreciate, I'm curious as what you guys in the group thinks about having this particular facility next to the car traffic. And there's two, I guess there's a few things to think about here. One is, this is down low, so the sound from the car is on the deck below, it's going to bounce off the structure above and come down. So this is going to be pretty noisy. I think is one thing to think about. Another thing to think about on the flip side is, those cars are moving fast over there, but I think there's a perception of safety of headlights and people potentially able to see the people, active transportation users on this facility. So I'm trying not to think about myself, but put myself in other people's shoes here. And I think, yes, it's noise. I mean, I guess there's trade-offs between, is it too noisy, but as opposed to the other options where there's no one on that thing. I mean, there's occasionally a train that goes by, there will be, this is a freeway, so there'll be cars kind of going by constantly. So there's that perceived safety thing. I don't know. I mean, I'd just be interested in what people think about the trade-offs. The stacked bridge design, though, this is going to be loud. So I just want to throw that out on the table.
Yeah, and by safety, Mark, you're just to be clear, you're talking about like eyes on the eyes?
Yes, just the eyes on, and again, not that they can stop or they're going to stop, but the fact that they can maybe get on a cell phone, hopefully don't pick up the phone in the car, but they could say, I think I saw something back there happening, and maybe can you get out there? I guess is just a question. I'm also thinking about nighttime, the stacked, when this is under something at night, I mean, it seems like that could be terrifying, if not horrifying. I mean, for this amount of distance and fluorescent light. I mean, I don't know what it's going to look like, but I just want to throw that out there, I guess. Some thoughts.
Yeah. And, I'll say in both cases, we're going to need lighting, right? No matter what, we're going to need lighting, whether it's tucked under the upper deck or it's hanging off the side like this. there's going to be a need for pedestrian scale lighting. There's going to be a need to make sure that that environment doesn't have dark corners and pockets here and there. But you know, the different environments are gonna make that more or less challenging, right? Excellent point about safety and personal security. That is something that we're going to have to factor into the design. Same thing with you know, the houseless and camping and the potential for that. You know, how do we create a place that is both a destination but also not a place that, you know, people are living under the bridge, right?
So Derek, what about moving this thing up to the upper deck? I guess adjacent to the upper deck and not being on the lower end, so it'd be less noisy.
Yeah, I mean, so to that point, Mark, I guess I would question whether it's going to be more noisy.
Well, it's going to be noisy,
depending on the wind, though, right? The direction of the wind, and which way it's carrying. But it is going to bounce. It is going to bounce. It is going to be noisy.
Well, this one's guaranteed to be noisy all the time, I guess. Wind or no. If it goes up, you've got a better shot. You know, a lot of that noise is just going to radiate up and not necessarily bounce off a roof.
Right.
You're right. If the wind's blowing the wrong way, it's going to be noisy. But I don't know.
Yep. And there are things we can do to mitigate some of that noise, sound baffles and barriers. You know, but you're right. I mean, we have to contend with the noise levels there.
So there's a comment from Marion, and then I see Guthrie. So Marion said the concerns that Mark has expressed are the main reasons the Pedestrian Advisory Committee rejected the 2013 proposal. And then I'll pass it on to Guthrie. I think you had your hand up.
Hey, thank you. And I think Mark addressed a lot of the questions that I had around this as well. So thank you for that, Mark. This also just keeps me thinking about the access at either end and just kind of looking at the corkscrew designs between all three versions. Reminds me of the Morrison Bridge on the east side, if you're trying to get down to the waterfront path, and just want to try to avoid that effect as much as possible. Keeping in mind, looking at great views, really showcasing the active transit use. It would seem to me that on the north side, instead of having it curly Q or corkscrew, there may be an opportunity to do more of a switchback design, which allows resting points along the pathway. And I think that that would be a personal preference for getting through those and just the ability to take a break partway through instead of having to, you know, go all the way up it or down it.
Yeah.
Elevators are great, I find, in concept, but a lot of times that when I try to use them, I find them to be broken. And so I know that that's probably a consideration within that scope. But if there are elevators, having some sort of redundancy factor would be really nice to have built into that proposal.
Great points. And that actually speaks to the point that Mark brought up earlier about, you know, having a shared use path on the upper deck, right? And so while that might be better for noise, that's another 25, 30 feet that you have to, of elevation that you have to make up on either end, right? And ramping and the corkscrew. I agree with you, Guthrie, the Morrison Bridge corkscrew, although that's only, you know, 30 and probably 25, 30 feet of corkscrew covering that vertical elevation, that span. Not a good design. And certainly something that we would be looking to improve upon with any sort of loop ramp design on the north side of the bridge there, the Vancouver Bridgehead. So yeah, point well taken.
And let's see, Michael, you put your hand up. Just so the next slide, the next set of design options actually zoom in on the area around that corkscrew in Vancouver. So maybe let's try to, any further comments about the up in the box, like the different options, and then we can keep talking about the ramps as we go to the next section.
Yep.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah. My questions had to do with the corkscrew, so maybe I can just wait and see if they still exist.
So I want to make sure if, you know, Mark asked the question, if anyone else had any comments in particular about, I thought that was a good point, about having, you know, even though they're zooming by, that there's actually more presence with this one option here, and make sure if anybody else had anything to comment on that. I think Marion, you did, so that was good. Thank you.
I feel similar to Mark on that as well.
Thank you. All
So
right.
just to reiterate, Anita, so safety and noise being the kind of top two primary concerns with the previous design that the PBAC had objections to last time around.
Yeah, I think that's what's
Is that
under the
capture it?
isolation of the active transportation.
path.
Yeah. Marion, did I see you unmuted yourself? Did you have something to say?
Yeah, that's correct. It was safety, yeah, including the homeless problem and the noise and all that. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So again, this last part of the presentation focused on the bridge itself, the bridge environment, and the various configurations of the shared use path in relation to the rest of the structure. Now we're going to dive into Hayden Island Marine Drive area to look at a couple more options. Oh, before that, we'll talk about Vancouver. Sorry, had my slides out of order. So we're going to zoom into Vancouver, downtown Vancouver. We'll talk about the corkscrew. So Michael, any particular questions you had about that, we can address them here. But basically what we're showing in each of these two options is the shared use path landing on the east side of the interchange here, the I-5 SR14 interchange, and touching down on the waterfront, kind of parallel to Columbia Way. And then as we move under I-5, parallel Columbia Street, which it turns into. Now, I mentioned earlier, as a part of this project, we're looking to realign Columbia Way so that it tees into the Columbia Street, Columbia Way intersection on the west side a little bit better. But for the purposes of these graphics, just know that this is sort of the idea. We're coming off the shared use path on the east side of the bridge, whether it's tucked in or cantilevered off the side. We're going to ramp down to the waterfront and connect into the Columbia Renaissance Trail that's there on the waterfront today. So option one shown here again is a 2013 LPA, and here you can see it's zoomed out a little bit more, so you can see the connection to the Vancouver Land Bridge that ties into Fort Vancouver, and then winds its way around Columbia Way over to the west side and through downtown. Option two again is a similar configuration, but the bridge design here is where we have the path cantilevered off the side. So again, looping back down and around, connecting to the Renaissance Trail, and then to the bike facilities and sidewalks on Columbia Street. Any questions, comments, thoughts about that? Michael, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the corkscrew there. Oh, you're muted, Michael.
Muted.
I thought I'd taken care of that. I apologize. I had a question. Well, first, let me say my preference. I like the corkscrew or the design, but the larger we can make it, the better. I'm not 100% familiar with the Morrison, but there are other places in Portland where you just get dizzy. The helix is so tight that you're always spinning. The idea of having something a little broader, and as somebody mentioned before, where every once in a while on the way up, there's a little wide spot you can pull off if you need a rest. So whichever of these, I mean, I'm not a fan of the stacked crossing, but anyway, but the question that I had, so that's just a preference. The question that I have, it has to do with the noise level. I was not last time, I was not a member of the Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, so I'm not privy to their concerns. But what I thought I heard somebody saying is that they're concerned that it will be noisier if the bike path is under the bridge than if it's beside it. And I'd just like to hear from somebody who was there then and can provide some feedback. Thanks.
I think Marion raised that point, and then Marlon, I see your hand up, so we'll go to you next after that, okay?
Yeah, we did think that it would be noisier with being underneath the bridge. I don't know how much you ever stood underneath the freeway, but it's really noisy. It's noisy and the sound echoes more. But I think safety was more of a consideration than noise. I mean, you're going to get noise if you're standing next to a freeway also, but not echoing so much. But the safety thing and especially at night, and this feeling you're going to go into a tunnel. That's what the concerns were.
That answer your question, Michael?
Yeah, it does. I've done the 205 bridge enough times to know that that is not exactly a peaceful environment either, but I really honestly don't know which would be worse. But I think anybody going across the bridge is going to be, whether which one is worse, I don't know, but it's not going to be the most pastoral part of your journey.
I can add, during CRC, we actually went out into the field and did some noise tests of bridges, of bicycle and pedestrian facilities at grade with the bridge structure and below grade. And it was quieter underneath. I don't know if I have access to any of those that old information, but I do know that we responded to the PBAC at that time. Just trying to remember the time frame of that. Can I follow up too, just with a comment on Marion?
Sure.
Marion, were you talking about the CRC Pedestrian Bicycle Advisory Committee, or was that a local agency
Yeah, I said
pedestrian?
the Portland one. So I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the only reason I didn't put it in there is I was trying to type fast and get.
That's good clarification. Thank you.
Yeah.
Marlon, you've been patiently waiting there with your hand up, so you.
Okay. Well, I got some comments here that I think will address all of these. First of all, since the sound issue came up, in my experience, it would be much quieter under the bridge if you lowered that bike lane so that it's not low. Your sound from the freeway generally goes out and up. That's why you'll see these fences along the freeway, those walls. Those are put up to deflect the sound away from the residential areas. So I think it's going to be quieter under the bridge. The other comment is, why can't we take this whirligig thing and tuck it under the deck? Tuck it under the deck. You can make it bigger under there. You could make it oblong. And that would give you some opportunities for some flat places. It would lessen the slope of the darn thing as you get down. And it's further sheltered from rain and the weather. And you can do that on both ends. End of my comment.
Great comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Marlon.
Thanks, Marlon. Okay, any other general comments, thoughts, questions on downtown Vancouver and the shared use path? And again, we're going to come back to all of this in the discussion breakout session that we've got planned.
Yeah.
So we can talk more about this. Yeah, in the interest of time, why don't we move on to the next section here. Okay, so as I was saying earlier, we're gonna zoom into Hayden Island Marine Drive because there's a lot going on here, and we want to give you a sampling of the types of connections and all of the considerations that go into them with each of these designs. So, you know, we know that there are a few things that some general assumptions we can make with the project and what we can what we know is going to be the case between, you know, in this general area. So we know we're going to replace the North Portland Harbor Bridge, right? There will be an arterial or local street connection that connects Portland to Hayden Island, Marine Drive to Hayden Island. And, you know, we know that we've got to tie into the existing networks, bike and walking networks. We know the 40-mile loop trail, the Marine Drive path, crosses through this area under I-5. How do we tie into that, right? That is a regional trail. That is a regional connection that we want to make. Connections to transit, You know, and while we don't know the exact location of the stations quite yet, we know that those connections have to be made as well, right? And depending on the interchange environment, depending on what streets connect to I-5, and what streets have more of a local kind of access function, those active transportation connections are going to look and feel different as well. So again, we'll zoom into each of these options, but I want to briefly describe what we're looking at here. So with option 1, it says full interchange there, and what that means is we've got a full interchange at Marine Drive, and we have a full interchange on Hayden Island.
Sorry, Kayla, could you advance the slide one? We can zoom in a little. There you go.
Yeah, there we go. So
Thank
it's
you.
a little bit larger there. So again, full interchange on Marine Drive, full interchange on Hayden Island. And so these, when we say full interchange, we typically mean that there are ramps associated with all of this. The interchange access area is much wider. We have a larger footprint. And so we need to think very carefully about how the shared use path and how active transportation facilities on the local streets is connecting various parts of the island and to Marine Drive and beyond. So here you can see the shared use path in green. And for certain sections, it's kind of parallel along local streets and shown in purple. And that can mean anything from a separated on-street protected bike lane to a fully separated shared use path. We haven't quite figured out what facility type it is. And if you recall our previous conversation a month ago, you know, the range of facility types and the look and feel of them could vary. Generally, what we're assuming is that they're going to be very comfortable, very safe, right? But so with this particular design, the connection from, if we start from Delta Park, would go under MLK, and then it would loop around and under I-5, under the freeway, and it would connect at the same level to the local street that would carry traffic, carry bikes, and potentially carry transit over to Hayden Island. And so once we land on Hayden Island, the shared use path facility would mirror that parallel to the roadway, cross that intersection at Tomahawk Island Drive, and then loop back under around I-5 to connect with the northbound I-5 ramp. And there, you know, you can kind of mentally tie that back into the bridge design options that we talked about earlier. It could be tucked under the bridge. It could be cantilevered off the side of it, but it would be on the west side of the bridge at that point.
So Derek, there's just a few good clarifying questions in the chat. One, yes, the arrows are, those are just pointing like continue. So the arrows that are, I guess, for both the gray and the green and everything, they're not intended to say that it's a one-way path. They're two-way facilities. It's more just it'll continue, you know, in that direction.
Yeah, awesome.
And then
great
Derek, could you explain just the different colors? Because there's no legend the way that this is shown here. Could you just, the purple, blue, gray, and green?
Yeah, so you know, again, the purple is what we consider local streets. So all of those would have sidewalks, they would have bike facilities on them. The green is the shared use path. So that is generally going to denote a separated pathway for both directions of people walking, biking, rolling. The darker blue is your arterial streets. So those are going to be streets primarily carrying higher volumes of vehicles, of traffic, you know, and you'll notice that they tie into the interchange access areas, and you know, for that reason, they're carrying cars onto and off of the freeway, I-5. And then lastly, the gray or light blue is the highway, the interstate. and the ramps associated with each of those interchanges. So the one other thing is the circles. So the circles denote level intersections where streets meet each other, or in some cases where the shared use path will meet a street intersection at the same level.
And so, you know, if you look at the survey that's on the IBR website, or if you've seen that, the questions for these different options, really the question that is the way it's being framed for the public is about the interchange configuration. And so, you know, at that this is kind of why I was saying at the beginning, like, don't get too lost in the details here, folks. There's, but at the same time, you know, so we're going to show you 3 different interchange options that are being, you know, considered right now. But there are important differences when it comes to active transportation. They all, you know, fulfill certain needs and, you know, outcomes, but there are a few key differences, as I think that's what Derek is trying to kind of walk you through.
Yeah, so one of the main observations with this particular option that I'm sure many of you have made is that we are crossing I-5 twice here. To, you know, if you were to make a trip from Delta Park or North Portland, Northeast, Southeast Portland, and you wanted to go all the way to Vancouver, you're crossing over to the other side of I-5, crossing over North Portland Harbor, and then crossing back under, looping back up and around, right? So something to consider, right? That is the alignment of the path based on where we're able to cross the North Portland Harbor on the local street. And given the nature of this particular interchange design on Hayden Island, we need to tie into the ramps to get back onto the bridge. So think about that as we go through each of these options as well. How is the routing for the shared use path ideal, or maybe less than ideal, and why?
We have a couple comments. One from Mark's got his hand up, and then Guthrie has something in the chat that so go ahead first, Mark.
I kind of took my hand. Well, I mean, I guess I'm kind of bouncing back and forth, Katie, between trying not to think too much about detail and then looking at something that looks is getting specific, I guess. One thing is, it looks like there could be a local bridge and a freeway interchange on Hayden Island. Previously, that was sort of as an either or. You're getting an interchange to get access to the island, or you're going to use, or my recollection is it was sort of, there's an arterial bridge option. We make one big interchange in Oregon at Marine Drive, and we access Hayden Island via a bridge. Now I think we're looking at a bunch of options. I would just flag that anytime we're bringing a path across a freeway on and off ramp, which appears to be in the upper part of this image, that's also sort of a, you know, would be a less desirable sort of intersection to move through or sort of engage with, I would just say.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Mark. And the reason, that is one of the reasons why you'll notice that particular interchange that you called out is circled in blue. It's a intersection where we're meeting an arterial. That darker blue is denoting the arterial, and so there's going to be a lot more traffic. Crossing that street, you'll likely have to wait a little bit longer for the signal. You know, there's a lot to contend with at those locations.
Derek, so Guthrie, thank you for the reminder here. He said, I'm very interested to hear Barbara's thoughts. If you're willing to share, bookmarking the thought as we enter our last half hour. So then we haven't heard much from Barbara, and then also Rachel Cameron joined us late too, and haven't heard much from her. If this is a good time now, or we're actually going to go into is this our last slide? We have a couple more slides, right? And then
yep,
more,
just a few more
conversation. And we're not going to go into breakout rooms because we've only got 8 folks. So we do have probably about 25 minutes or so, 20 or so, 22 minutes. So
right. There's 2 more slides. And so I guess I'd maybe suggest moving through the 2 slides. And so then we can really have more of a reflective conversation about all the options.
Yeah.
But maybe Derek just really hit the high points. Make sure we allow time for the folks to
Yep.
discuss.
Kayla, could you go to the next slide? All right, so option 2 is what we're calling a partial interchange. And what we mean by that is on Hayden Island, you can see that we've got 2 less ramps to I-5, right? So it's a half interchange design. And as you can probably tell, it minimizes the footprint of the interchange and kind of constrains access in some ways, vehicular access to the freeway to one street, and that's Jansen Drive there. So what that also means is that the nature, the character of the local streets on Hayden Island changes, right? So you can see now that that Jansen is the arterial, it's in darker blue, whereas Tomahawk Island Drive and Hayden Island Drive are going to have more of that local traffic, local access environment along them. Now, here, again, we have an arterial bridge that's on the west side of I-5. So it's carrying vehicular traffic over to Hayden Island that way. And in some ways, the shared use path is pretty similar to what we saw in the last example. So if we were to follow that same kind of route from Delta Park, we go under MLK, and on that shared use path, we wind our way over to the interchange, under the interchange, and then we would have to, if we were going to go over to Hayden Island, what we would have to do is we'd have to climb up to that arterial street, that arterial bridge that is carrying us over, right? So we're going under I-5, and then we're coming back up to the arterial bridge to go over the water. So, you know, the exact kind of winding nature of that path, the alignment of that path as we meet Marine Drive and that intersection there has yet to be determined. All we know is that there's going to be some grade change involved, some ramping involved with getting folks walking, biking, rolling up to that arterial bridge. So we cross over to Hayden Island and we tie back into Tomahawk Island Drive. And you know, we can do our shopping there. We can spend some time on Hayden Island, or we can continue straight on up to the bridge. And there you can see what's happening is that shared use path is kind of getting closer and closer, aligning with the bridge, and it's getting ramping back up and into that that northbound span. We're going to be onto the bridge at that point, and that's going to parallel transit, as transit is also climbing up onto the bridge. There's a little bit of a curly Q there. You can see at the edge of Hayden Island on the north side there, and the idea there is to connect the path to a future park that will be on the waterfront on Hayden Island there. So again, you know, the nature of that curly Q, how big it is and how much it winds and where it touches down, you know, we haven't quite figured out exactly yet, but we know we want to provide some access to that future park. All right.
Michael, we're going to hold your question till Derek finishes the third option.
Is that okay, Michael? Yeah, great. Okay. We'll go to the next one. Thanks, Kayla. So this is the no interchange design. And Mark had kind of alluded to this earlier, where on Hayden Island, we don't have any freeway access ramps on or off ramps, entry or exit ramps. And what that's doing, what that's accomplishing is you know, a very minimal footprint on the island itself. Now, that said, what we're also having to do, because there aren't any ramps, access points to I-5 on the island itself, is provide arterial bridges across over to Marine Drive, across North Portland Harbor. And that is the primary way that folks coming from either direction, north or south on I-5, are going to access Hayden Island, is they're going to use the Marine Drive interchange. Okay, so that being the case, now that we've got arterial bridges on either side of I-5, what we can do with the shared use path is run it along the east arterial. And so what that accomplishes is a much more direct path for shared use path users, whether or not you're going to and from Hayden Island or going all the way between Vancouver and Portland, right? The path is on the west side of I-5 there. So I think that about covers it at a high level. Do we want to go into discussion?
Yeah, I think what we'll do, Derek, since we're probably going to stay in the group and and we've only got it, maybe about 10 minutes or so, that we'll just kind of continue with questions, and we're not going to use these breakout questions. So I think I see Michael's got his hand up. Would you mind if we asked Barbara and Rachel? We haven't heard from them yet, and then you could go. Would that be all right? Okay. So, Barbara, you said you kind of wanted to wait. Would you like to have some comments? I know people ask questions about the kind of the elevator versus the helix versus the ramps and other sorts of things.
Yeah, thanks for asking. I agree with whoever said that if there's an elevator, and I don't know how you do this in a cost-effective manner, but to really have some redundancy, because it seems like somehow elevators always break down when you most need to be in a hurry or whatever. And and then the other thing was the person who mentioned that if you're having that, even though somebody that's using a wheelchair might be fit, which I'm actually not, it's just really difficult to keep pushing up or down, actually, for that matter, a really steep grade. And they have some, every couple of whatever feet or whatever, have it where it kind of levels off for a little while, just like on a long ramp, and then keeps on, would be really helpful.
Yeah, thanks, Barbara. Absolutely, we want to have landings, those flat areas at regular intervals, just to give folks a little bit of a break, and maybe we pair that with viewing areas, with benches, things like that, and it really helps to kind of punctuate the travel space, right? Rather than it being just this long winding thing that I have to climb up all the way several stories up. It's actually a place where you can kind of take your time and do it in a more casual way, right? Not everyone's going to be racing up this thing. So great points, Barbara.
Yeah, thank you.
And then I see Rachel Cameron from Killer Queens Cyclery. Do you have anything you'd like to share? I see you're on. Maybe just listening. Well, we'll give you a chance if you'd like to type something in the chat, please do, but it's good to have you here. So we'll move on to Michael with your hand up.
Yes, I really like that we're revisiting the possibilities of what to do at Hayden Island, because it's really a clustery mess right now. But years ago, I worked at Hayden Island at Jansen Beach, and I've got to tell you, the idea of option 2, where you have direct access, non-freeway access from Portland, I can see that working. But I think that chances are Hayden Island or Jansen Beach relies so much on people coming over from Vancouver for tax-free shopping that if they make it more difficult by forcing people to go into Portland and then come back out, I just honestly, and I realize this is not an active transport issue. I have trouble seeing that having any acceptance at all.
And Kayla, could you put the images back up, and then that way maybe we can reference, the group as a whole can reference different locations as we're as we're talking about them.
The one that
Um,
showed all three together side by side, maybe.
Yeah, that might be it. Yeah, that's a good place to start, I think.
I think it's slide 35. Yeah, there you go. Thank you, Kayla.
Perfect. So Michael, you're saying their option 2 is a deal breaker, or option 3 is a deal breaker?
Well, from an active transport, it's kind of indifferent, or there are differences, but just overall, Jansen Beach is the entire commercial development there was based on it's really close to Washington and has no sales tax. And if in the redesign of this we put impediments to the people that want to come across, I don't necessarily advocate going across the bridge to avoid sales tax, but that's why that shopping center exists. And it's hard for me to imagine option 3 not getting barfed on. And that was all. It's not really a question that people need to answer so much as just, I worked there at a stereo store for 3 years and nobody from Oregon went there. That was just purely people crossing to avoid sales tax.
Yeah, and it's a really good reminder, Michael, that beyond active transportation, there's a lot of other driving forces in what is going to kind of shape this project, what is going to influence the area for different modes, however you're arriving there, and how you access the destinations in and around these areas. Right? Yeah.
So Rachel put in the chat a great comment about the conditions on Hayden Island, and if you looking at these 3 options side by side, it really it becomes more apparent than if you look at them individually how different they are in terms of how we could leverage the project to make better local connections. The path, not just the pathway, but as we said at the beginning, any of the streets that are rebuilt would include better sidewalks and bike lanes and better community connectivity. So any other observations or thoughts, reactions to that, just of what would happen around the Hayden Island interchange? It sounds like Rachel's pretty familiar with that area. I just want, if anyone else is, I'd love to hear more about your thoughts.
I could just, go ahead.
There's a couple comments from Marion in the chat about the extra distance. Don't think it would be an impediment to drivers or bicyclists, but it could be for pedestrians and wheelchair users, unless they might have access even if drivers don't. And then another one is, I think having a new harbor bridge is a great idea. Why not also have a smaller new bridge from Hayden Island to Vancouver? Then you wouldn't need any interchange on Hayden Island off from the freeway. And then I see Mark and then Guthrie, you have your hand up, so go ahead. We've only got about just a few more minutes, 3 or 4 minutes. So let's wrap these questions up. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I'm taking up more airtime again, I think. Do we need 2 arterial bridges in option 3, I guess? Is that, we need both of those as opposed to just one?
It's a good question, Mark. And my understanding is that we would need 2 of them to accommodate the projected traffic volumes going between, right? So we're essentially eliminating an interchange, so that's kind of where we're making up for it, to kind of ensure that mobility is preserved to the island.
And I guess just also, and then I'll shut up. Option 2 and 3 are kind of keeping the Marine Drive interchange sort of as it is, as opposed to option 1, which is totally rebuilding it. Is that why is that happening?
That so there will be it isn't necessarily as is. So when you say as is, you mean like today, right?
Well, it appears isn't sort of what you're showing in 2 and 3 kind of what's there today?
No, it's a little bit different. the ramp configuration on the west side, you're right that it's kind of it's got that folded ramp design,
Mm-hmm.
kind of a loop there. So that is similar to what we have today, but it's tying into that arterial bridge, right? So all of that would be reconstructed. Same thing on the east side. So on the east side, we're showing your traditional kind of diamond ramps that come on and off, right? That tie into Marine Drive. What we've got today is a much more convoluted kind of loop system that resembles it's actually got an even bigger footprint than that. So slight differences, but you're right, full interchange.
I guess,
yeah.
yeah. No, I appreciate that, Derek. I'm just saying what I would push for is a hybrid. I guess option one, my understanding is we need the interchange of Marine Drive, not on Hayden now. I mean, I think the point was well made that most of the shoppers are coming from Vancouver to Jansen Beach, which is good. So I think we need to think about that traffic movement to Hayden Island. On the Oregon, speaking for Oregon, I think we need the interchange at Marine Drive to work the best. So that's where my interchange money would go, is Marine Drive. And then I guess I'm trying to marry which is the best of the arterial locations for the arterial bridge to get to Hayden Island, and which works best from active transportation would be to keep it on I want the views of Mount Hood and the gorge the entire time. So I want to put it on the bottom side of this drawing, on the east side of the structure, but I don't know if that's capturing traffic coming from Washington effectively enough to get into Jansen Beach, as opposed to having it, I think where it was located was on the other side of the freeway interchange. So I'm just trying to, I think we would want the new, anyway, that's all I'll say. I'm talking too much. Thanks.
Great job building from your intuition there, Mark, and not getting into the details. You get a gold star. Good job. Really helpful comments.
All right, Guthrie, I think this will be our last question or comment.
Sure, and thanks for taking it. Just from the active transportation perspective, I do like the option number 3. I understand there are a lot of concerns around the different uses, but from a rider transit perspective, I think that has the smallest footprint. And also in terms of disincentivizing use we want to see and incentivizing other types of use, it does a very nice job of that from an active transit perspective.
Thank you. Great observations.
Thanks, Guthrie. So we're going to wrap up real quickly. So Kayla, if you can go to slide 43, we're just going to talk about the program timeline and next steps. So as you can see from the slide, we are here, which is we've still got a ways to go. And the intention of forming this community working group is to hold 2 focus type groups and gather feedback during this phase of program planning. And we've achieved that objective. At this time, we're not currently planning future meetings, but as program planning evolves in the next several months, we may wish to reconvene this group and ask for additional feedback about active transportation experience. So next slide. So there is opportunities to continue to stay engaged. There is a design options survey that's open. Here's the link to it. Note that the design options that we looked at today are not going to be in there. So I know a lot of this was given to you this evening, and you may want to take a look at it and have more comments. So Kayla's going to send these to you again, so you have an opportunity to review those, ask some additional questions if you need to, and give us some more feedbacks. And we'll give you like maybe 2 weeks. Does that sound good? A week and a half? What's today? Tuesday? Yeah, maybe by next Friday. So next slide. We do have an online open house. We encourage you to check that out. And you can see that it's to provide an overview of potential design options, timeline, and there are translations in 8 different languages. It's a really nice website, so you might want to check it out if you haven't. Next slide, Kayla. And then additional engagement opportunities. We have social media. We have a newsletter that you can sign up for. And then today's meeting and all the materials are at this link. And in our program library, there's all the other materials from the other working groups as well. So with that, we are done for this evening with a couple minutes to spare. So I want to thank you all for putting the time in. Appreciate getting to know all of you and hearing your feedback. Really appreciate the focus on making sure everybody on this committee had an opportunity to speak as well. So with that, we will be in touch if we need to. And again, if you have any questions, please contact our IBR staff.
Thank
All
you
right.
very much, everyone.
See you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.